I think religious affiliations can really be, the body of Christ, honestly. So, um, you profess a certain faith, but faith without works is dead. So, I mean, it's nice that you believe these kinds of things, but is it action oriented? Are you putting it into motion? Are you actually supporting people when they need the support? Are you loving people and not expecting anything in return? Are you encouraging people when all of their other family members are like, they're hopeless? So I think that's where church has a nice, rightful place in everyone's life, is that it can reintroduce this concept of hope. People in addiction, people who have substance use disorder, honestly don't have a lot of hope. That's probably the most common thing I hear, is that in the worst times of their life, their hope meter is on empty, and if there's anything that we can do as a people, as a church, for example, it's reintroducing this concept of hope, because addiction will back you into a dark and isolated corner. It will, because it tears apart families, it tears apart relationships. It is hard for people who have been supportive to support for a long period of time. And honestly, they get tired too. They're like, when is this gonna, when is the change gonna happen? And for them to kind of carry that burden on just their shoulders alone, oftentimes it's too heavy. And it makes sense. Like, it's like caring for a sick parent or a sick grandparent. It's like, that's why nursing homes exist, because a lot of people, even like a group of family members, can't care for just one sick individual. It takes a lot, right? And that cliche comes up in my mind. It's like, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes a village to help someone recover. And that's where the church has a good spot in at least helping people and assisting people in their path to recovery.
I think for me, the biggest, this might make me emotional. Yeah, it's going to. I think for me, the biggest moment where hope was really visible and present in my life was when I became a member of a 12-step fellowship, and my relationship with God started changing. Before I came into recovery, I'd never really felt that sense of unconditional love and acceptance. And when I had my first sponsor, she taught me that I'm safe and secure in the love of the fellowship. And growing up, I was kind of angry at God. My family is religious. My dad grew up Catholic. We went to church on Christmas and Easter, I think to make appearances. And in high school I had a pretty strong youth group, but my relationship with God was never as strong as it was when I entered the rooms of a 12-step fellowship. Because, when I normally tell my story, I say things like, I have a story that will make you believe in God. Because there's really no other way that I could be here today. Treatment centers will say things like, well, you earned your seat here, things that they say to people, I don't know. But the reality of my life is that I earned a hole in the ground, and a lot of my friends didn't make it out of that. And for me, hope was introduced into my life when I met men and women who loved me unconditionally because they were the same as me. It was a moment where it was like a moment of clarity or a spiritual awakening for me, coming in and working a 12-step program and being surrounded by people who they could be the me too. I would confess these things that I thought were like horrible things that I had done or experienced, and people who were also in recovery, leading the way before me, would say like, oh yeah, I went through that. And it would leave me with this sense of like, what? Why was I so worried? So I learned how to like open my heart to other people and really share those experiences, because that's the therapeutic value of one addict helping another. Is, you know, I can sit down with other people who are seeking recovery, and I can say, you know, I have been through these situations too. I've climbed out of this hole and I know how to get out, and I'm going to not just reach down and help you out, but I'm going to jump into the hole with you and we're going to get back out together. And for me, like, it was just, I didn't feel like anyone would abandon me, because the fellowship itself, people come and go. But the fellowship and the 12-step program that I'm a part of is constant. You know, and I learned that in my relationship with my higher power, that my higher power is also constant. And that's not something that ever goes away or leaves. That's always present. And I was able to develop that healthier relationship with God, the God of my understanding, by seeing it in other people, especially in other recovering women, because I didn't have that strong, like, mothering relationship. I didn't have strong friendships with really anybody, let alone other girls growing up. So when I met other women in recovery who had God and who spoke openly of God, this was like a whole new concept for me. I didn't have that sense of mentorship or leadership, and that really gave me a lot of hope to see what other women said was God at work in their lives. And it wasn't just that I heard them say that, it was that I saw it and I felt it. And I felt that unconditional love and acceptance. And for me, that's where that hope really, really came from.
I think the part that stands out to me the most, and that still sort of fascinates me, is the whole recovery program is people are coming in broken, and they find a hand reaching out to help them. And pretty much the sky is the limit. If you're willing to get involved, you can get involved in many ways. But there's a certain point that you get to in your recovery where you realize that I actually have some tools now. And you see new people coming in just like you were, and you can actually reach out and start helping them. And so I think that moment for me is, there are little times that continue to happen over and over where I just call them a God moment, where I can see that God used me to do something that 7 years ago when I started this process, I would have never in a million years thought, you know, I'd be on a board of directors, or I'd be going to a men's house to lead a spirituality meeting. So it's those little things that, to me, that stand out, that I can see God using me now. It absolutely has played a huge role. I grew up, like I mentioned, in the church and in youth group. I have obsessive compulsive disorder, and one of the things that deals with for me is with doubts, struggling with doubts and with my faith and trying to prove everything. And so I found that even though I was a believer, anytime I would really feel God's presence or try to get close to God, the doubts would creep back in and sort of keep me at bay. And I would reach sort of a frustration point where I would back off. And working the 12-step program, the second step is that you came to believe that a power greater than yourself could restore you to sanity. The third step is the action step, where that we turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. So in working the steps, I actually had to move outside of my doubts. and actually make a decision, even though I didn't have all the answers. And it put me, for a little while in a little bit of an uncomfortable place, but I had to take that leap of faith so that I could continue working the steps. And again, it was, taking the advice of someone that had been there before. Even though I was uncomfortable with it, I had seen that they did it and that it worked for them. And so when I did that, that's when my life really started to change. And God became more real to me. And I have him in my life now more than I ever felt, prior to working the steps.
Well, there was a young man of about 24 years old that came to me, and he had a problem with alcohol and marijuana. And in getting to know him, he was very socially awkward, didn't quite even know how to relate to me as a counselor. But getting to know him and finding out about his background, he came from a family that was extremely non-supportive of him throughout his whole life. And he came to believe that all that his family basically had told him how useless he was. And it took a while for me to convince him he could change that. And we eventually got to the point where he actually was willing to attend church. So I had him pick, I talked to him about different churches in town, and he picked one, and he went one Sunday, and I prepared him for what, he had never been to a church before in his life. But he met two women at the front door who were very gracious to him, showed him a bulletin, explained the bulletin, sat with him, got him coffee. He was just thrilled. I remember him saying later, he says, "Why are they keeping these places secret?" Church was a big secret from the rest of the world. But what mattered to him, most important in all that, was the relationships that he built up that were positive, that encouraged him, that convinced him that he did have worth. And that went a long way in helping him with any shame and guilt he had about his usage. And at this point, he had already stopped for about 6 months. But it meant a great deal to his overall recovery to know that he could actually meet other people who thought he was all right.
So what I do professionally is multifaceted. I wear a lot of hats. So I am a certified recovery specialist, meaning I've gone through a specific set of trainings. I'm credentialed with a certification through the state of Pennsylvania as a certified recovery specialist. And that means that I am similar to a peer supporter. I'm someone in recovery who works with other people in recovery. But I also have a bachelor's degree in psychology, so I also have a lot of clinical experience. I've worked in residential treatment, I've worked in outpatient treatment, I've worked in administration in drug and alcohol, I've worked in case management, I've worked in DUI, so I've done a little bit of everything in the drug and alcohol world, which makes me a diverse player. So I lead Westmoreland's mobile drug and alcohol crisis team. We're called the community engagement team, but it's easier to explain it as the mobile drug and alcohol crisis team. And what we do is we work primarily with EMS providers and Westmoreland's drug and alcohol case management unit. We respond to individuals who are experiencing drug and alcohol related crisis. So this could be an overdose, it could be an extreme alcohol related crisis. We've responded to people who got drunk and fell downstairs. We've responded to people who are extremely intoxicated. We've received calls from families looking for help. We go and we screen and assess those clients and we bridge them to treatment. But above and beyond just the clinical aspect of doing that is that we are a team of individuals who are in recovery, individuals with unique experiences related to recovery. So we're able to go in and not only bridge those people to treatment through assessment, but we're also able to say, I've been here too. I have also overdosed. I have also been to rehab. I have also, been arrested or had to seek treatment. And that really seems to kind of put people at ease, because it's not a paramedic, it's not a police officer. And don't get me wrong, I'm so grateful for our first responders and everything that they do. They're our partners in this operation. But we're just a little bit of a different edge. This is kind of the first time that people are really able to see others in recovery responding to them. Because I know for me, I don't think I realized that the services that are available now were available back when I was using as a kid. I didn't know the certified recovery specialists were a thing. If I had had one, maybe my recovery would have been a little bit different, maybe easier. I can't project that, so I don't know. But we're able to connect people with services that maybe were not so easily accessible before. We're able to bridge people to treatment regardless of their insurance situation. And when we go in and we say, hey, you know what, don't worry about the money, we got it covered. We'll get you to treatment regardless. We'll walk with you every single step of the way. You are not alone, because we know how it feels to be alone in those moments, and we don't ever want another recovering individual to feel that way. So we're able to use our pain to prevent others from having to experience that. It kind of shortens the recovery process, I think, and makes it a little bit less intimidating. It makes people, I feel, more likely to accept what we're offering.
When I was just starting in the recovery ministry, I was with some friends who were already doing recovery ministry. And they challenged me with that question, the question that could a person who died with a needle in their arm still go to heaven? And it was a little bit of a challenge for me, being early in the recovery ministry. But, it was a question that for me really spoke to the power of God's grace. That absolutely yes, whether being in active addiction is a disease, whether it's a sin, God's grace is with us. God's grace is for us. And absolutely, in the worst of our disease, God still loves us. I believe that God will set all things to right in the end time, and that through Christ's death and resurrection, we have victory. And even in death, we have victory. And Christ is the victor. We've lost so many. And yet Christ wins. And this disease will not be the end. I have hope. And that hope is the conviction that evil will not prevail. And so I try to live out that hope as I minister with people in recovery. And so, yes, even in active addiction, even with a needle in their arm, people will go to heaven. I believe that. Christ will win.